to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Jermey Lyman of Birch Coffee in New York City. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show. Now, if you're just joining us on the show and you're new to Keys to the Shop, I say welcome to you. There are a lot of episodes on the show. We're getting up in the 500 range, and it'd be great for you to check out keystotheshop.com. I've got all the episodes there on the episodes page, except for the shift break episodes, which are actually going to be put up on the website pretty soon. But all that said, you will be updated with all of this information if you subscribe to Keys to the Shop. If you are a listener for a while, or if you are just new, subscription to Keys to the Shop is the best way to stay updated. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And also, sharing these episodes is one of the best ways for Keys to the Shop to get out there for the information, these great interviews, all of the insights and inspiration that's provided at Keys to the Shop over the years. That would be great if you think of somebody that might need the content of today's episode or any episode. Just say, hey, this is a great podcast I found and there's some great information. Here you go. Simple as that. And I thank you so much for doing that. Now, Keys to the Shop, in addition to doing this podcast, also offers consulting and coaching for you and your business. If you're wanting to take things to the next level with your existing operation, with your people, your operations, your quality, or you are just starting a coffee bar and need guidance in the process of establishing things the right way, there are many ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can work with you and has worked with so many people to help them achieve excellence in their cafes. I would love to talk with you about what that might look like. All you have to do is reach out to me and we'll set up a free discovery call. Email is chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS at keystotheshop.com. We'll have a conversation, talk about what's going on with your current or future business, and go from there. So again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Now, Prima Coffee specializes not just in providing world-class commercial coffee equipment, but they are also seriously focused on helping you select the right equipment for your business and for your situation, whether that's brewers, grinders, espresso machines, or even things like under-counter refrigeration. Prima is an incredible resource to help you get outfitted and supplied with the best. Keys to the Shop listeners get 5% off their orders when using the code KEYS5, that's KEYS and the number 5, at checkout. That's a huge offer. So visit prima-coffee.com/keys to explore what they have to offer. And don't forget to use the code KEYS5 for 5% off at checkout. If you're in the market for commercial coffee equipment and want to work with the best, then you need to work with Prima Coffee. This episode is also brought to you by the Barista Series from Pacific. It is the standard setter for excellence in plant-based performance beverages worldwide. They are tested by and designed for the world's best baristas before they even launch any of their extensive lineup. So no matter what plant-based beverage you use from the Barista Series, you can expect it to stand up to the heat from the steaming process, have awesome texture, and be balanced in the cup so the coffee always is the star of the drink. So check them out over at pacificfoodservice.com. Get it in your shop and try it. I think you're going to be impressed. I think your customers and baristas will be too. So if you want to serve world-class plant-based beverages in your cafe, then you need to be using the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everybody, so welcome to August's Founder Friday. Today we're talking with somebody who's really created something special in one of the world's destination coffee cities, New York City. We are talking with none other than Jermey Lyman of Birch Coffee. Jermey Lyman is the co-founder of Birch Coffee, which is a New York City-based coffee company that ever since being opened in 2009 has grown to become one of New York City's premier and most loved independent coffee shop chains. It has more than a dozen locations throughout the city. The focus of Birch is on customer service, and you'll hear that in today's interview. That's a huge catalyst for starting Birch Coffee in the first place, as service was something that Jermey believed was lacking in the specialty coffee industry. And he and his business partner, Paul, banded together to set about founding Birch Coffee with that goal in mind and have done a fantastic job. Jermey has overseen the development of not only the high-level service, but methods in which to hone and develop those skills amongst his teams. As they have grown, they have really caught the attention of a city where it's not really that easy to get attention because New York is such, like I said, a destination coffee city, and they've come such a long way in fulfilling their purpose and standing out in the market in New York City since 2009. And in today's conversation, this is a great conversation. I'll just say that. It is a very vulnerable, open conversation, not just about the starting years of Birch Coffee and the growth of the business and all those things, but also woven throughout the story of Birch Coffee is the story of Jermey and how he has grown as a person and as a leader within the space, and how he's been shaped by being an owner of this business, and how different aspects of his life have actually helped shape the business in turn. So we talk about things like overcoming arrogance, what makes a great business partnership, making great business decisions, what's good fear and what's bad fear, what customer service excellence looks like without being a micromanager. There's just so many things that are covered here. I know you're not only going to walk away with some practical knowledge, but some things to really think deeply about. Because like I said, Jermey has blessed us with candor and openness in this talk today. So I hope you're ready to be impacted by what he shares today. This is definitely one of my favorite conversations. Here now is my interview with Jermey Lyman of Birch Coffee. All right, Jermey, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Thanks so much for being a guest today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've kind of been trying to coordinate this and get you on the show for a little bit. I'm glad to get to do it today. Birch Coffee has, what is it like? It's 13 locations right now, right?
Right at this moment, I think it's 11.
11. Okay.
Yes.
Right. I mean, You've built quite a company, and I'm curious, how did you, we'll start just in the beginning, of course, with these Founder Fridays. How did you find yourself getting into coffee? Because before this, I don't think you had coffee experience, and neither did your co-founder. Am I correct?
That is correct. Neither me nor Paul had experience with coffee specifically. No, we had a lot of experience with restaurants, with F&B. We both bartended, we both waited tables, we managed places. But as far as the coffee aspect of it, we did not have any experience. No.
Okay, so you two came together to start Birch Coffee. You had this experience with food and beverage, with restaurants, which is a lot more than a lot of people starting coffee shops, frankly. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that gave you some kind of an advantage starting into it. Was it that experience that really kind of led you to make the decision to start?
So it's a great question. What we thought was lacking in the industry was excellent customer service. And I think because we both came from restaurants where we're waiting tables and we're bartending and customer service is essential, we both knew that was something that we needed to bring to the table. I don't think I had my first specialty cup of coffee until I probably went to Coffee Fest in 2008. So, I think it was the experience both of us had working in the restaurants that enabled us to figure out what it was that we wanted to do differently within a coffee shop. And we both, we both met in recovery. So I'm sober 17 years.
Nice.
He's sober 16. So we met about 17 years ago, and we were just like buddies. We're just friends, and we both happened to work in the industry. And so we both, obviously being sober, we like to hang out in coffee shops. So that was something I loved to do. And I think it got to a point where I realized I don't really like the job that I have now. And I think that I can do this. That was back in 2007, 2006, 2007, something like that.
Okay, so you thought there was a missing component, and it was service. What made you think that was missing? Was it your experience of bad service, or a compare and contrast to good service that you had previously somewhere else?
So I think it was my experience of what good service looked like and what good coffee looked like and tasted like. And I could not find a combination of the two. So I think when we got into it, it was back in, and we first opened in 2009, but we had been doing a lot of research, 2007, 2008. And I think there was just kind of this hoity-toityness to specialty coffee and highbrow, attitude about what really good coffee is. And so that was and I think that's where the stereotypical barista came from, as far as having that attitude. And that was just something that we felt was missing the mark. And we thought that we could contribute and make it a better experience all around.
Nice. First of all, good use of the word hoity-toity. I don't hear it very often, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And also, you're right. I mean, back then, especially in 2007, and those, I guess, adolescent years of the third wave, we were very much little highbrow. There was a few bars that were like idolized by the industry that were notorious for rejecting sugar and cream and all that other stuff. And I like to think we've matured, but there definitely was that stereotype to overcome. So when you came together this way, now you had worked in restaurants and doing bartending and all this other stuff, and you came together to start this company. It's a lot different owning and starting a company, of course, than working for somebody else's company. How did you take your first steps, and at what point during your first steps did you realize, like, this is a different animal than just working for somebody else?
Yeah. Well, it's vastly different. I mean, vastly. And I think going into it, I almost had this attitude of, I got this. And it was, I guess I can call it an arrogance. It was an arrogance. And that was what I think kind of pushed me into it. And then when I got into it, I was like, oh boy, I don't actually know what I'm doing at all. And we would make mistake after mistake. And those mistakes had, huge consequences. And we didn't know what we didn't know. And that was something that we would say all the time. But, just as an example, when we first opened, I think 3 months in, our payroll was 120% of our revenue, which is that's astronomical. That's not sustainable. So the reason that is because we were looking at our pro forma, which is what we thought we were going to be doing numbers wise. But obviously we had a payroll that was going alongside this revenue that we just were falling very, very short from. So, I think in the beginning, before we even opened our first store, I struggled a lot with the momentum. So in the beginning, before we opened our first location, doing the research, because I had this job actually between bar jobs, and I worked at a mortgage company. And that was where I really realized I cannot be sitting behind a desk. But I would start working on the coffee shop, and then things at work would be okay, and then they would be bad. And so I'd pick up the coffee shop stuff again. And I struggled to kind of keep that momentum going. And so I decided to just quit my desk job. So that was a real kind of, that propelled me forward a little bit. I got a job at a bar. I was working at night, and, during the day I would just go to different coffee shops, and I felt like I needed to be doing something. So I wouldn't just go on Google Maps and look up places. I would physically start walking throughout neighborhoods, taking notes, looking at where there were laundromats, where were there bodegas, where all these things that work well alongside of potentially a coffee shop. So that was kind of how I kept the momentum going. And then, little things too. So setting up a bank account, and actually, we took a trip to Coffee Fest, and that was, so we did all these little things. We set up a company. So those kind of kept us going in the beginning. And then once we got into it, it was just a whole other ballgame, because it was at that point that we realized, yeah, we need to figure this out a little bit better. And it took about a year, maybe 18 months. I had this kind of epiphany, or this, almost like a white light experience, where, I had this, everything needed to be done the way that I wanted it done, even though I didn't know what I was doing. But that was my attitude. And we had people that would leave because I was maybe not the easiest person to work for. And so I called a friend of mine who was a massage therapist. And this was around the time, I think it was around Christmas. And I reached out, we were about a year and change in, and I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I said, I need to get my team, I need to get them gifts. So I'm going to give them a massage, like from you, like I'll give them a gift certificate to a massage. And he goes, well, would you mind telling me a little bit more about what the problem is? And so I started to explain it. And apparently during his, tenure as a massage therapist, he was also learning how to be a business coach. And so we were talking about what the problem was and why I was struggling as hard as I was. And he said, it seems like you're trying to put a bit of a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. So maybe you need to start actually changing your behavior.
Wow.
And that was ultimately what I did. I had no choice. So that was the work we started doing. So we didn't get the massages. And Paul and I started going and meeting with this guy. I would say probably in the beginning it was once a week for years. And it was just analyzing problems, looking at where we can improve. I started reading more books about people, from people who had done this before I did. I think in the beginning I was so terrified of reading that I was doing something wrong, and I didn't want to think that I was doing something wrong.
Why not? Were you afraid of messing up the momentum that you had?
So I think I was afraid of doing something wrong because that's a part of my personality. It's ego. I mean, that's a big piece of what it is. I don't want other people to think that I don't know what I'm doing and that I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's not how I am now. I'm the first to admit I actually don't know how to do that. But it took a really long time. I think I'm very fortunate that I have the business partner that I have, because the communication between the two of us it's pretty incredible. We talk about everything and anything that we need to discuss in order to make sure that we're just always on the same page. I think we always have the business in mind first and foremost, and that allows us to really make super informed decisions and to ultimately get on the same page, even if we're not. It's rare that we're not on the same page, but that's been critical. And so that was something that we established early on. At a certain point, we ended up going to couples therapy because it was,
Wow.
I was hitting a wall, and this was maybe like 6 or 7 years in, and I was just, I don't know. I was at a point where I was like, it can't continue to work this way. And so we needed to just take it a step further. So that's what we've learned, how a partnership works. And I think that's why we still work together and why we're still friends after 12 years.
It makes me think or want to ask, is how you met through recovery part of the reason why you feel like from the beginning it seemed like you have a particular foundation of vulnerability in the relationship? Does that contribute to that? And it seems unique to the relationship there compared to other kinds of partnerships out there.
So 100%. Without recovery and without meeting where we met and just having that foundation, because it's not just that we work on it together. When I am not at work and I am in my own world, my own personal life, I'm constantly doing that work too. So I'm constantly working on trying to be as good a human being as I can. And it's, there are times where I fail miserably, and that's okay. But the beauty of what I've been able to do over the last however many years is be able to just recognize it, like pretty much right away. Yeah, it's been tremendous. And, there's a lot of things that we kind of apply to our business that we've learned from where we met. And I don't know if I'd be where I am without all of that work and without just, being in recovery for the last 17 years. I mean, there's no way.
Your ability to recognize things early, especially in business, I think is such a critical skill, because so many businesses, and you know this now that you've been talking at Coffee Fest for a while now, and you've been talking with other coffee shop owners and counseling them from your experiences, will walk years and years down the wrong path without recognizing the thing that you were able to recognize within a year of opening your first store, which is great, because you could have gone down 3 or 4 or 5 years just burning through employees and keep continuing with arrogance, or you're just not looking at yourself. So it's really awesome that early on you're able to sort of do a 180 in terms of leadership.
Yeah, at that point, it felt like I had no choice but to do that. And look, the reality is too, there are people that we'll make a bad hire. That happens, and it's not something that we necessarily realize until we're a couple years in, and it's just like, oh my God, how is this person still working for us? It's been 3 years, right? So we try to, every time something like that happens. I think too, in the beginning, we did things that, we would take on business that we thought we needed to just because we needed the income, we needed the revenue. And now we're at a place where we try to make the most informed decisions possible. And we try to always remove ego from the equation, which is a big challenge, is a huge challenge. I guess what I mean by that, so I love Puma. Big, like all my sneakers, they're all Pumas. And Puma approached us to set up a coffee shop within their space in their flagship location on 50th Street and 5th Avenue, like right in the center of everything in Manhattan. And we did it. And it was, it was the coolest thing, but it was so unsuccessful, just as far as from a business standpoint. And so I think I didn't necessarily think that it would be problematic to be on the second floor where you'd have to go up three escalators in order to get a cup of coffee, which is just not going to happen. So, it's little things like that where it's like, okay, what informed my decision there? And I thought it was awesome. And I still think it's really cool. And we got a cool sneaker out of it, but a Birch sneaker, which is really great.
Wow.
But that's the point. It's so now we have to make decisions that are going to only let us get to the next level and take in more revenue and be able to expand and grow without it taking up a lot more of our resources. Because when we do something, like anytime we make a decision, if it's to open a store, if it's to do a partnership, a collaboration, our resources are limited. My time is limited. It's finite. So I need to be really particular and specific with what I'm spending my time on, because I can't get that back. And it takes up a lot of energy. And, when something is not going well, it takes up that much more energy. And I think too, people ask all the time, I love what I do. And I'm sure that you do as well. And just because, you've been doing it for so long, and this is, you're from when I've heard you speak, you're very passionate about the work, and I'm the same way. But I've been fortunate enough to be fairly successful with it. And people ask all the time, it's like, what if you weren't? Would you be as enthusiastic? And it's a tough question to ask because, and to answer, because I don't know. I think it would be I would definitely love it, but it would look very different, And so that's why I try to avoid those pitfalls, because I don't necessarily want to experience, because I've experienced plenty where I'm like just putting it all in and it's not going anywhere. And we've had things that we've had to pull the plug on, and we've had those failures, which are, I think, important. But it's also important to know when to actually say, you know what, this isn't working and we're going to have to move on.
Okay. So when you talk about not going anywhere, two things. I'm curious to know exactly what you thought was the end goal when you first started Birch, and compare and contrast that to the decisions that you're making now for what your return on investment or even your return on mission looks like when you make decisions. Like, as you talk, in other words, as you talk about, what if you weren't successful? I imagine success looks different than simply dollars.
There's 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So what is that goal, that metric for success? And how does that play into where you originally thought you wanted to go with Birch?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I think it ties really well into people's personality and their ego, and because a lot of people, I believe, and I fall into this trap too. I feel as though a lot of people define themselves, period, by how successful they are in terms of dollars and cents. Right. So if business is going really great, I'm super successful. It doesn't mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily matter. Like, your level of happiness is almost connected to the financial success of a business. And I fall into that trap, I think, fairly often, but I quickly realize that that is not the case. And that needs to not be the case, because at the end of the day, I mean, we saw with COVID, it basically said, hey, your business is not bulletproof, and things can very much go sideways. We saw a lot of companies go out, and it was extraordinarily unfortunate. I think for the longest time, we would always have this attitude of, our business is recession proof, because people are always going to buy coffee. They're going to get haircuts and they're going to buy coffee. Those are the two things, right? But if there's this kind of crisis, then it's going to look very different. We had to close our stores for a few months, and, business was obviously completely at a standstill. So in the beginning, the vision I had was, all I wanted to do was be able to go to work and hang out in a coffee shop. That was it. That was the goal in the beginning. That was what I wanted to do. I loved hanging out in coffee shops. Didn't know what kind of work was going to be involved. I knew there was going to be some work involved, but I wanted to be able to sit down, do a crossword puzzle, have a cup of coffee. That was the goal for opening my own coffee shop. And, within a day, it's funny because I think years later, I talked about how I don't know if I ever did one crossword puzzle in the coffee shop, because it was such a challenge. It was just, there were so many things that would come up, and then someone doesn't show up, and then I have to cover a shift. And there were just all of these things that you just don't expect, and you got to deal with it, because at the end of the day, I am responsible. Paul and I are responsible for everything. Whatever comes out of a barista's mouth to a customer, I am responsible. And that's those are big shoes to fill. And it's a big responsibility to take on, but that has to be the reality, because that will also inform who I'm bringing on and how much care and attention I put into hiring, which is crucial and essential. I know, that stuff that you talk about a lot. Is just retention, and but it's tough. So I think in the beginning, Paul and I realized after we started to build a nice customer base, we realized if we were going to actually earn a livable wage between the two of us, that we were going to have to potentially open up a second one, and it came a little quicker than we thought, because we knew we were going to lose our original lease after 3 years, which was a bit terrifying. So then that kind of lit the fire, and we started looking, because we knew if we had closed our first store without having a second one open, that we were finished. And that fear drove us. fear drives a lot of, I mean, it drove a lot of decisions we made. It still drives decisions that we make. I think it drives most decisions that people make, but it's about that awareness, and being able to make the distinction of like, okay, why am I making this decision?
Right.
Am I making this decision because, I think this is, am I making it from scarcity or from, the opposite of scarcity? I'm drawing a blank on the word. Surplus?
Abundance.
Abundance. There it is. So, and it's important for us to be making decisions out of abundance, because if we make them from scarcity, we typically make the wrong decisions. It's just like if somebody says something to you and it throws you off guard, and you get all worked up, it's probably best that you just don't say anything. You just stay quiet, because I know if I get reactive, I'm just going to say something I'll regret for sure. So I think that has a lot to do with the decisions that we make today.
Okay. So today, though, you have a body of experience through opening many stores and becoming better leaders, operating for as long as you have. And I imagine what you say is fear. I mean, there's got to be a difference between fear and urgency, because when I hear the word fear, and I imagine a lot of people hear that, they think rash decisions, amygdala hijack. They think about just bad decisions for the business. So today, does the fear or the urgency, I guess, with which you make decisions today, how does that differ from back then? Because then you didn't have as much experience.
Well, I think that's exactly the point. They were a lot more uninformed, the decisions that we would make. And we would be more likely to make a wrong decision strictly because we didn't have the experience of making that wrong decision. And I think in the beginning, we encourage people to make as many mistakes as they can in the beginning, because they'll just get experience with that. I'll give you a great example. So when we engage a customer, we train that you don't say anything to the customer aside from hi, hello, hey, how are you, and use their name, period. We avoid sir, ma'am, sweetheart, darling, all those things that people say when people walk into, to some sort of coffee shop, because it happens all the time. And the reason we do that is because we offend nobody. We offend nobody. But if we offend one person by calling them ma'am, right? And that's what would happen. And we would potentially, and even though the number is so small, but the point is we learn that by making that mistake. And so it's tiny little tweaks like that, which we just are constantly on the lookout for. Like, how can we constantly be improving how we're engaging, the decisions that we're making, the projects that we're taking on. And it's paying attention. And I think people don't spend enough time, I know I didn't, spend enough time sitting in the store and just observing, just paying attention, watching how baristas engage with customers, watching how customers engage with the retail shelving. How are we trying to improve that story that we're trying to tell? Because, there are stores that we have where there'll be 1,000 customers in a day. It's a lot of people, a lot of eyes. And so what are we doing to engage those people? What are we doing to not only engage those people, but to get those people to engage other people when they leave, right? So that's, and one of the classes that I teach at Coffee Fest is about branding and marketing. And I'm obsessed with that. I mean, I'm obsessed with customer service, and I have been for years, but that's another thing that I think is so powerful and unique, about what we're able to do and how we're able to connect. But as far as, the fear stuff goes, it has to do with the experience. And I don't mean that, you're afraid that you'll go out of business and you'll be homeless and that'll be that. Although some people go that dark, just on a dime. But I think there's healthy fear, but I also think there's unhealthy fear. right? Like if you're standing right by the edge of a cliff, there's a fear you'll fall. That's a good fear. That is a healthy fear. And that is a really important thing for you to retain. And the reason why that fear exists is because people have fallen. So, but then there's unhealthy fears, which are, oh my God, if a customer comes in and there's always sugar on the countertop, like we're finished, we're going to go out of business. And that was this crazy fear that I thought when I would see people not cleaning up after, a barista not cleaning up the condiment station after a customer made a mess. One of the things that stopped over the years was the level of micromanagement. I think it's important to have some degree of that. But that was just one of those things that I learned where when I walk into a store, I don't want the team to think like, oh my God, what is he going to find?
There's a big difference between what you were just talking about, which is you were just saying, I pay attention to all of these details. You're obsessed with hospitality and, branding and marketing and the customer journey and what they think and how we're engaging them. And then at the same time, not micromanaging, which at first might seem like you're contradicting yourself a little bit there.
And I'm not saying that I don't address it. What I'm saying is when I see something like that, I no longer feel a need to rush over to a barista and say, hey, I need you to clean that, right? Because we've done such a great job with building relationships with our customers that if they see something like that, they know it's typically not the standard, right? So I'll get a phone call that, someone had a bad experience at one of the stores. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened in the past. And they call because they know it's out of the ordinary and they want to give us that information and they want to let us know that happened because it's not typical. And I think that only happens when you build that relationship, when you build that connection with people that are coming in on a regular basis. Because if you didn't have that, they wouldn't call you. They would just never show up again, period. Right. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. So it's like all the things we do in the event that we mess up once and that someone's going to forgive us. So, with those little types of things, like with the garbage, the crumpled up paper towel on the floor or the sugar, needs to be addressed. And we need to make sure that we're talking to the manager about it, making sure that they know what they need to do in order to train to get them to be on the lookout for that kind of thing. But we also don't want to create this environment of, oh my God, Paul and Jeremy are here. What are they going to find? Am I going to be in trouble? Because I remember when I worked at this office, if I ever got called into a superior's office, I was panicked. It's like, what did I do? I think human nature is we go there. I don't think it's, oh my God, I wonder how many positive words they're going to use to describe the job that I'm doing. I don't think we have a tendency to go there. I think it's just human nature. Maybe it's just mine, but I think a lot of people feel similarly. And so I want the people that are working at the stores to feel good about when we come in and they see us. And it's just like, they treat us just like everybody else. I remember I worked at this fancy hotel, and every time we did a good job. It was a very fancy hotel. We did a pretty good job. But when the GM of the whole hotel would come in, we would stop everything and we would bend over backwards and give this guy the most unbelievable service experience that he ever had. And I always wondered why. And we would almost not pay as much attention to other tables in order to get this guy the highest level of service. And what I realized was that the reason we did that is because then he would believe that that's how we're treating all the other tables. And, it's crazy because we weren't. We would literally, there would be tables that would get ignored because everybody is bending over backwards to deal with this person. And what I hope is that I'm being treated like everybody else. And I can tell that I am, which is, I think a kind of a beautiful thing. You know?
That is a beautiful thing. It's kind of reminds me of how people have said you're only as good as your worst drink, or you can kind of measure success on the valleys and not necessarily the peaks. Like the exceptional service that you give is good, but what is the consistent service that people experience on a day-to-day basis? They used to say in competition, like every customer is a judge. And, in the days when you started Birch, a famous barista would walk into a coffee bar and everybody would start really dialing in the espresso because they weren't dialing it in for the regular customers.
Yeah, that's a problem. Right? I mean, it should be like that all the time. It should just be like that all the time. And that's when I think that's when you have a bit of a problem on your hands.
Yeah.
But it's in the beginning, that was how it felt. It felt like people were just kind of bending over backwards to make sure that we thought that they were doing a good job. But I think the relationship we've created and established with our team is that we want them to provide an incredible experience to every single person and to do it every single time. Not 80% of the time, not 90% of the time, 100% of the time. If they're making an attempt to be engaging and to connect with every single customer that they come in, if they fall short, they're falling short in the high 90s percent wise, as opposed to just being mediocre and falling short and ending up in the 70s. So that's the goal. When a customer comes in, it's almost about locking eyes with that person and making them feel like the most important person for the next 45 seconds, period. That's it. Mm-hmm. Full stop.
So in the early days, you've got a couple stores, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to have some control and be aware of the quality of hospitality and the quality of coffee and all that stuff it's a challenge, right? But not nearly as much of a challenge as maybe it is now at 11 stores.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, with this kind of a focus that you've got, how do you manage this goal at scale? I mean, what's the mechanism or mechanisms in place to be able to manage the quality control for these areas? And is there a point at which you think maybe, this would be too big, or this is too many stores, we can't control it beyond this?
So to kind of tackle the last question first is, I don't know what that number is. And I think when we get to a place where we feel that is the case, we'll just evaluate what we need to do differently. I think with the first few, we would just open. We didn't have anything. There was no standard. We didn't have any SOPs, standard operating procedures in place when we opened our third and fourth, maybe even our fifth store. And so, the training was fairly loose. We would bring somebody in. They would just shadow. It was okay, but it wasn't excellent. It really wasn't excellent. And I think when we had those first few stores, that was where things were the most inconsistent, believe it or not, because two stores had full menus, like had sandwiches and salads. One had pizza, which was just crazy, right? And then we had another one that was just coffee. And then, we introduced soups. We were just trying all these different things to see what would really connect. And we ended up stopping food altogether. We do pastries and we do all that, what people expect when they come in the morning. But at a certain point, we started to actually look at all of the steps that one needs to take in order to brew a pot of coffee. Started to look at the steps that someone needs to take in order to open the store in the morning, right? Like an opening checklist. All these different things, they require consistency, because if someone brews coffee differently than somebody else, there could potentially be grinds that fall into the coffee pot, and someone gets grinds in their coffee. And I think that's one of the worst things that can happen in the world. So we started to really take a hard look at, okay, what are all these steps and how can we implement these steps across all of our stores? And so that was what we started to do. We started to build all of these lists of how to do everything and how to do everything exactly the same way. And that was just how we started training. So now we don't train in the store until after they've gone through probably 12 to 16 hours of training offsite, where we go through all the drinks, we go through, what makes up all the drinks, and we do mock transactions. So we put them behind a fake register and we come up and we say, hi, can I get a large cappuccino, or can I get a latte? And then we go over, here are the questions you need to ask when, if someone comes up and says, hey, can I get a latte? Right? So I don't know what size the latte is, right? So I need to ask them, I need to get that information from that customer, right? But if I said, oh, what size would you like? Then the customer's response is, oh, what size have you got? Right? And then we add another question in there. So we figure out ways in which we can be as concise as possible. So when someone comes in and they say, hey, can I get a latte? And we don't know the size, we say, oh, would you like an 8 ounce or a 12 ounce? Boom, done. Right. So that's how we train. And I think now there's so much more consistency across all of the stores than there ever was, strictly because we changed how we trained. We changed the questions that we asked. We want to limit how much time we're taking with each customer while getting all the information that we need.
Okay, so the training is intuitive, it's realistic, and it is detailed. And obviously, as you go on, you're going to know your customer base a lot more. It's based on your menu, obviously, frequently asked questions people are going to have. That's awesome. Now, who is doing this training? And where I'm going with that is, like, what does the organizational structure look like in terms of carrying out these kinds of quality control measures?
Yeah. So a few things. So what we've done is we've kind of created an almost like a personal individual checks and balance system where a barista writes information, the cashier will write information on the cup. And then they look at the cup and while they're inputting the information back into the register, they're self-checking themselves. And then they'll pass it off to the barista who's going to make the drink. If something is wrong, if they use the wrong abbreviation, if they just write C instead of cap for cappuccino, the barista will hand it back to them and have them correct it. So that's an additional layer of, some sort of check system. But every store has we call them coffee shop leads. I don't like using the term manager. I think it's too ambiguous. And we want someone who's going to lead the coffee shop. They're going to lead the team. They're going to lead the customer experience, and they're going to lead the store overall. So they're extraordinarily well-versed with how we do everything, but also why we do everything. There's never a time where we'll say, do this because we said so. And the more we explain, the more people, our team knows why we do the things that we do, the more likely they are to get it right, because they actually understand that there's a process, and the process is to make everybody's life easier. We don't want to create things that are making everyone's life harder, right? So if we can eliminate a step or two steps in order to do something, great, we'll do it. And then as far as the initial training, right now, it's from me. I do it. So that, I don't know how sustainable that is, but I do it. I just did one this week. I did 12 hours of training this week. It's exhausting, but I'm super passionate about it. I love it. And I think it's essential. The people that are in the store, they are the face. They are representing the brand. And if you don't have people that are doing it right, then it is the negativity, and the people that are doing it wrong, they're going to impact the people who are doing it right faster than vice versa.
100%.
So,
yeah. What is it that makes you want to do it yourself even now with as many stores as you have?
So it wasn't. I mean, before COVID, I had been working with people and training them how to do it. But just with, the positions that we have and where we're kind of at from a corporate team standpoint, it's just something that I'm doing. So it's not sustainable, and I will, be able to, like, I'm working on how am I training a trainer, right? So that's my big document that I'm working on, is how to train somebody to do what I'm doing, which is, a lot of it is just experience with being in the industry for, the restaurant service industry for, it's over 20 years, a long time. Mm-hmm. And I'm a consumer too. So I go into a coffee shop that's not mine, and I pay attention, and I see what they're doing, and I take mental notes. It's like, okay, they did this really well. How can I implement this in my stores? Or they did this horribly wrong. How do I make sure that never happens at our store? So, I can't teach someone to have the experience, but I can teach somebody and train somebody how to be a lot more observant of their surroundings. And, we do, when we're doing the initial training, we do a question and answer. So basically a new hire will stand up at the front, and we do it in, I try to train at least 2 to 3 people at a time, hopefully more. And this way I can kind of knock everything out with doing it with a bunch of people, as opposed to doing one-on-one. The one-on-one would just be completely unsustainable. So, someone stands at the front, and we go around the room and we just fire off questions. What's your favorite, what's your favorite dessert? Do you like to cook? Dogs or cats? Like stuff like that. Right. And so, obviously we're trying to get to know the people that we're going to be working with. And we tell them, if they're not comfortable answering a question, don't answer it. But we try to get a little bit more familiar with them. But I'm paying attention to, are they looking at the person when they're asking the question? Is the person who's answering the question making eye contact back with the person who's asking the question? Are they asking the same person, or different people asking the same person the same question? So if I ask the person, hey, what's your favorite movie? And they say, and then 2 people later, they say, oh, what's your favorite movie? I'm paying attention to whether or not they're listening to what everyone else is asking. Because being a barista, being a cashier, it's so much more than just getting somebody a cup of coffee.
Yeah, 100%. They are the concierge. They're no matter what position, they're the representation of not just the company, but essentially the industry. The overused phrase, I guess, the last link in the chain is, one of the things that we use to provide urgency for staff. Having a knowledge of how people conduct themselves in an honest and authentic way will definitely give you a prediction of how they're going to handle things with customers. And customers pay attention to those things. Yeah. Like if you're paying attention to that, and that's amazing, because customers aren't paying attention to the dial-in of the coffee. They're paying attention to their tables, eye contact, and all of the minutia that I think we sometimes completely forget about. You mentioned going other places and paying attention to your surroundings, and that's definitely critical. When you said that somebody did something really well, maybe I can use that in my store, or this went horribly wrong, and how do I prevent that from happening? What are you seeing that lets you know that's good and that's bad?
I think it's just personal experience. And I'm trying to be like average Joe customer, like just average Jermey customer. Like that's the hat that I have on. And they're subtle. It's really subtle. This is years ago. I was at a coffee shop and someone asked for light ice, right? Which is just this thing. And I think it's like the bane of coffee shop managers and owners' existence, right? Where someone comes in and say, hey, can I get a coffee, an iced coffee with light ice, right? So, there's all these judgments that come into play. It's like, okay, why do they want it light ice? Do they want more product? Like what's going on here? But I remember someone held up the cup of coffee. The barista held up the coffee with the ice. There's a little bit of ice in it. And they made this face, and I can't do it because we're talking through audio only. But the look on this person's face, like this major eye roll, was just like, is this little enough, kind of thing. And I was horrified. For the person who was asking the question, and it's just, so for a long time we had this we had people that would come in. I would literally get an email from this one individual almost every week about light ice. And he would just go on a tear about light ice. And I realized, like, we need to just be okay with filling it up all the way to the top if someone asks for light ice. And that's just it. Because there was a time where we wouldn't fill it all the way up because we would, try to make it, they can't get a fast one over on us. It's like, we're going to give you the same amount of volume, but it's just going to be less ice. But it got to a point where it's like, it's just not worth the fight. And there's so many times like that, so many things where it's not worth it, right? Just let a customer feel good about the experience. And, there's sometimes where we can't do certain things. But so for another example, we have a 16 ounce cup, which is for drip pretty much, and, for tea. And our large latte is 12 ounces, right? So people would come in and they ask for a large latte. We'd grab the 12 ounce cup and they'd see the 16 ounce cup and they say, oh, can I get it in there? And for the longest time, we were just, we'd say no. They couldn't do it, right? And, well, it's not going to taste, it's just going to taste like milk, all these excuses. And just because, again, this hoity-toity, no, if you're not drinking it the way that we say it, then you're drinking it wrong. And so it got to a point where it was just, why do we feel like we need to fight people on this? So the way that we explain it now is if someone asks for a 16 ounce, we say, oh, the 12 ounces typically are large. If you do want to get it in the 16 ounce cup, we can totally do it. We just need to steam 2 separate drinks. We need to steam like a small latte, which is an 8 ounce drink, and then maybe a small milk steamer, which is another 8 ounces. And then we'll combine the 2. And they have to pay for it, right? Because we physically don't have a steam pitcher that has enough capacity to steam for a 16 ounce drink, period. So we just we changed the approach. We just looked at it. We just didn't want to fight. It's like, it's not worth it with some of these things. Mm-hmm. And so, if we can do something, why not do it? Why not do it?
I like that philosophy and the idea that somebody is fighting for I guess they're fighting to not be taken advantage of, or they have some internal dialogue that says, like, this will not happen on my watch. Obviously, they have the wrong mission at work.
Uh-huh. 100%.
Yeah. What are they fighting for?
Yeah. It's, and I think, and we talk a lot about this too with training, where what gets people riled up is when somebody behaves in a way that they themselves would not behave. And that's what throws them off, right? So when someone is just not expecting something to happen, and all of a sudden something happens where someone just says something and is just so rude, this like fight or flight or freeze kicks in, and that's the last time that they should be trying to make an informed decision, because it's the worst time to make any sort of judgment or decision, because all of the blood has raced away from your brain and is gone to every other area of your body in preparation for, like, get out of there, fight them, or just don't move. Mm-hmm. And so that's what throws people off. And then it becomes this, well, no, not on my watch. That's not going to happen. Because I think then a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm not going to be taken advantage of like that. It's just get through it, move on. And the next person and the next 20 people are going to be delightful, comparatively speaking, and they're likely to just be delightful, And if you let every single customer, and I won't curse because I'm not going to curse, but I was talking to a friend of mine, and this was years ago, and I was just having a bad day. I was walking down the street, and every single person I encountered was, I'm just going to call them a jerk, right? Instead of any other word. So Everyone that I encountered that day was just such a jerk. And I called my buddy and I was talking to him about it. And he said, it's likely that you were the jerk today, not them. Because if every single person that I'm encountering, I want to just push into into oncoming traffic, that's my problem. I'm the problem. And so if a barista, every single person that they encounter is just giving them a hard time, it's not the customer, it's them. And it's important to kind of just point that stuff out with people, because it's human nature, I think. And it's not just people in the service industry, it's everybody, and I don't think it's just people in recovery. It's everybody, so it's the human people are fascinating. They're fascinating, which is why I love what I do, because I get to engage with these different and fascinating individuals. And what am I learning? What lesson am I learning from every single person that I encounter? Because there's a lesson with every single exchange. I just have to be willing to look for it and be open to receiving it.
Yeah, a lesson that you can apply to yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Because you could, if you're in that space of everybody is wrong but me, all customers are bad and all baristas are good, and I'm a barista, so ergo I'm never wrong, then the lessons you learn have to do with fortifying that position.
Yeah.
Instead of applying it to yourself and being like, no, I'm actually going to apply some of this lesson stuff to me.
Yeah. And it's not about just working behind the counter. It's applying that stuff to every aspect of your life. There's this people would say this all the time, like they wish that everybody in the world had to take a job working as a waiter or a cashier or barista before they move on to whatever it is that they're doing. Right? Because there's just something to be said for people that work in our industry. And I think there's so many lessons that we learn. And I think that we're very blessed that we're working in an industry that can teach us so many lessons that we can just apply everywhere else in our lives. And I think if any of the baristas that are coming in and working for us, I want them to be a better human when they leave, which is the challenge. That's the challenge. How do we do that? And so I am on this quest to figure that out.
Well, I really appreciate that. This is kind of seems like the through line of how you're approaching leadership at Birch. And as you're talking about all of the shortcomings and challenges you've had, but also the victories that you've had in applying lessons to yourself and how you operate with customer service and serving your staff, it's really encouraging. And I know a lot of people out there, I talk to them and you talk to them. They're the major things you can put together for your business. You can get the right machines, a menu. You can have great branding and all that. But when you get in the guts of the business as a barista and you work there, it might be hell. And it's going to be heaven or hell based on, the things that you've been talking about throughout this conversation. So I really appreciate that. And as we wrap up here, I wonder, speaking to people who are either, they want to be coffee shop owners or they're currently looking to become better in their role as a leader, a coach, and an owner, what would you say going forward, especially in this, I'd say, newer way of doing business post-COVID? How would you advise people to address themselves and address their business in a holistic and healthy way?
I think being more observant and listening more, instead of, because there's a great saying, you're not learning anything when you're talking, right? It's when you listen. It's when you pay attention and when you're hearing what other people have to say about their coworkers and how it is to work in whatever environment it is that they're working in. I think listening is one of the most important things. And that's what we encourage the team to do when they're engaging with a customer. It's just listen, pay attention, just listen to what they're saying, because all they're doing is they're giving you their order and they're giving you a small piece of themselves. Like I drink a cup of black coffee. That's what I drink. And that's me. That's who I It doesn't define who I am, but and when I give that order at a coffee shop, it's like I'm kind of giving them a little bit of a peek into what it is that I like. And so listening to not only what customers have to say, but I think when we get into a place of we're right, nobody else knows what they're doing, they're wrong, it prevents us from really being open to change. And that was me in the beginning. I was so closed off to it. I didn't want to listen to what anyone else had to say. I was able to kind of change that fairly quickly, but listening is just so critical. And also reading books and, doing audiobooks of people that have done this before, that have experience with it. And it might not necessarily be something that works for you or for everybody else, but these things exist because I love to be of service, and that's what I do. I want to help, and I go to Coffee Fest because that is strictly what I want to do. I just want to be able to help somebody avoid the pitfalls that I experienced when I was doing it, and I think that's part of what you do as well. So we've made these mistakes. People don't have to make those mistakes. A lot of times they do, right? And they'll make them and they'll learn from them. And but again, it's about paying attention, just being super mindful of surroundings, being mindful of just where your feet are, and just listening. That's the biggest thing. It's just listen.
Jermey, thank you so much. It's been a fantastic conversation. How can we stay in touch with you and learn more about Birch Coffee?
You can visit birchcoffee.com. You can check us out on Instagram, the handle is @birchcoffee. You can email me directly. It's just jeremy@birchcoffee.com. And I'm fairly responsive with email, so that's the best way to hit me up. And I will be at Coffee Fest. I guess this will air probably after Coffee Fest, but if you go to Coffee Fest, I will likely be there as well. So we can connect in person.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to do that. And again, Jermey, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Chris, thank you so much. It's great to connect.
Well, I hope that you loved that conversation just as much as I did. If not for anything else, then just the openness and honesty with which Jermey explained how it's been to be an owner of a business like Birch Coffee and what kind of impact that's had on him and the kind of things that have really shaped and molded him as a person. And it was really great to see how honesty, self-awareness, and cultivating humility and vulnerability has worked in Jermey's favor and obviously in Birch Coffee's favor as a result. So thank you very much to Jermey Lyman for being a guest on Keys to the Shop on this Founder Friday for August. We really appreciate you and the work you do at Birch. Now, if you want to reach out to Jermey, it's just jeremy@birchcoffee.com. And if you want to learn more about Birch Coffee, you can go to their website at birchcoffee.com and also follow them on Instagram, which is just @birchcoffee. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about this episode or anything else at Keys to the Shop, the invitation's open. Just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. I am always here to listen to what you have to say. This podcast is made for you, so it's beneficial, and I want to keep making it better and better over the years, coming up on 5 years now, and we're just getting started. So with your help, it'll keep being relevant, practical, useful, and greater and greater. So again, that email is chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our episode. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen. As always, don't forget to share these episodes, subscribe to the show, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.